Welcome to a wonderful choose-your-own-adventure version of V'ger Please, A Hateful Voyage of the Delta Quadrant. Click here if you would like to know more about your host, Joseph.
Click over here if you want the window in the back of the limousine to roll up and be flooded with poison gas. That's how I always died in those books, man. It's like every time I got somehow gassed in the back of a limo. I think it was foreshadowing something very dark in my future. I'm Peter, by the way.
And we are making immediate reference to probably the most touching and all-immersive fan creation to date for our little podcast, Corner of the World, Peter. And that is Superfan Jack. We've referenced him on the podcast before. He is somebody who just is as big a Star Trek fan as anybody and is willing to do in-depth scientific research into in-universe continuity questions that we have. But his talents are not confined solely to hyper-focused nerd factoids. No. This man is a creator, and he created the very first V'ger Please interactive experience, specifically a choose-your-own-adventure style text game where you play as Harry Kim in the episode Worst Case Scenario, doing his playthrough of Insurrection Alpha.
It is a swan dive into super nerd. Where the fuck did my time just go? He dropped that thing on the middle of us in the workday, and I lost easily an hour into playing through this scenario, and I didn't even reach the end. I never even touched the holodeck wall. It got to a point where I was like, I have to get payroll done. This is bad for my business right now. I have to get back to work, and I cannot pick this back up because it will be another hour into the ether. And man, do yourself a favor. Can we link that in the show notes?
Yeah, I will happily do that. So by the way, I played that so much while I was at work, I burnt my phone's battery out. I drained it almost all the way down.
Too?
Yeah, you can play it on mobile as well. So, at least on Android. So, I've linked it everywhere that I can. It is called Harry's Run, and I've put it on our Twitter, on our Facebook page, in the trauma support group, and as far as wide as I can get it. And I will put it in the show notes here, so that if you're not connected to us on social media, you can find it. But it is a fully fleshed out choose-your-own-adventure game where you play as Harry Kim in Worst Case Scenario, and you have a lot of different options of what you can do, how to start the program, things that happen outside of it, things that happen inside of it, choices that you can make throughout that. Let's just say Jack is a connoisseur of everything that we also have enjoyed about Voyager, and makes quite a few amusing references to our own work, which I had to suppress my laughter in my cube as I furiously attempted to find a way to survive this game, which I have not found. Jack claims there is a way to beat it. I have not yet found the string to do so. But I'm going to keep trying.
We should make some t-shirts just so we can give a t-shirt away to whoever wins it first.
Yeah, if somebody can actually beat this, I promise a prize. I will figure it out once someone wins.
Let's nobody beat this thing, because I got a bad feeling this prize is going to be more bad/fiction. I think we can do that. So
the prize is Peter's suffering.
Yeah, well, that's a prize that Jerry Taylor's already claimed.
Jack, fantastic. Could not be more honored by its creation. I think everybody that's played it has had a good time with it. Thank you for doing it. Just
everybody's
fantastic.
Been very busy on the creative front. We had Jack's Choose Your Own Adventure, Darius, who has given us a cornucopia of dank memes, had some of his work, some of his best work, in my opinion, stolen by what? It was like a BuzzFeed or a Screen
Rant. It was Screen Rant. Frickin' Screen Rant scooped up one of Darius's spicy hot comic memes. He did the reasonable suggestion man gets thrown out the window version of Voyager, and Screen Rant found that and put it together in one of their stupid listicles and poor dude has his memes circulated, but gets none of the dreams that come with the memes. So I'm sorry your meme stolen valor moment has arrived, Darius, but it just means that
You've made it.
You've made it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the internet.
Another shout out we got was from one of our fans, Noelle, who's got its little podcast of her own that she titles Just a Typical ADHDer, and kind of talks a lot about the interests that she has, particularly nerd culture interests, and went through a lineup of Trek related podcasts that she listens to. We are among them, and we certainly appreciate all the nice things that she said about it. And I also want to thank her for talking about The People versus Star Trek Voyager, which I did not know about, and I started listening to, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I gave it a little listen, episode 1, just to see what those guys are about. The Voyager podcast, man, and really just the Star Trek ones in general, I try to stay away from. I think it's too easy for other ideas to kind of get in, and I don't want to fall into a thing where we start stealing other people's thing or there's accusations or whatever. But I gave them a little listen. We're well past where they started, and I liked everything I heard. So I think once we wrap up with our run of Voyager, maybe once we get a little deeper and there's even more distance in there, I'm going to give them a hard listen.
Yeah, it's flat out done in a, I want to say a more radio show style. You know, we're doing just kind of a more of a recorded conversation. They're doing a much more production.
Did you listen to their first episode?
No, I skipped to a couple episodes that I know we enjoyed podcasting about, which is always my tactic with these things to kind of get a feel for it. And yeah, I listened to their take on Sexy Vampire Kess adventures.
Was it in line with ours?
It was a different but still highly amusing take.
They had one thing they said that I thought was really interesting. That's that it seems like Harry Kim was supposed to be written for someone much physically younger than Garrett Wang, and I think that's the kind of insight I saw them having. I'm like, can't fall in line with that, otherwise it's going to start coming out of my mouth. But strong observation. Anyways, it was nice hearing her name out there. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time that she put in. Her podcast was a good listen, and I suggest other people go out there and check it out. Let's get a link to that out there too.
So we want to conclude all of this recognition with a request. We would love it if people spread the word about Vija Please. We would love to see more activity in terms of people leaving reviews, spreading links, or doing whatever that you can do to get the word out there. We love to bring more people into the fold. We appreciate all of the creations and shout outs and everything that people do. So if you are such a person that feels that you like the show enough that you're like, yes, I think other people should listen to this and join in the gleeful, dark fun that we have here, please do so. Leave a review on iTunes, a review on Stitcher, share it on any social media platform of your choice, whatever you feel like doing. We'd appreciate it.
We would. And with that, let's get the show on the road here, man. Season 4, Episode 2, The Gift.
I can't help but look at this episode through the lens of some of the stuff we talked about last week, which was how shoehorned things felt. The more I thought about what we talked about, the more it made so much sense to me of they didn't really figure out what they wanted to do with concluding that two-parter. And so they kind of just created an ending that they wanted, and they made it work to that end because they wanted to do this switch of characters and that sort of thing. And as a consequence, I think I enjoyed this less than the last time I watched it.
Really?
Yeah. However, overall, I do think that the acting ability of the two characters in which this focuses on elevates the material enough that it's overall good. Obviously, the big story here is this is farewell to Kess, whom you and I have come to deeply appreciate.
Jennifer Lean, who Kess, have come to love, and I wish I could remember the name, but way back in the beginning of season 1, One of the first couple episodes, we were pretty mean about some of the things we said. We touched on some of her mental illness. We got some pushback from one of the early listeners, and I want to give this nameless person an apology. You were completely right. I was completely wrong. She, I feel, knocked it out of the park for the entire 3 seasons that she was prominently featured in. And I am very sad to see Jennifer Lean's departure from the show.
I can't help but say that her time on the show was underappreciated, I think, by Trek fans, and that Kes as a character worked really well on Voyager. And as I look back at many of the episodes that we've enjoyed the most, she did a great job. And it's a shame that things got out of control for her and she wasn't able to follow through on further professional success because of what happened. This being her last episode kind of sucks. It's a pretty good way to wrap up her character arc. I'm not surprised to have read that the idea behind this episode came from Brian Fuller, who I mentioned last week is somebody that gets involved in the season, is probably one of the more talented writers they end up with for the back half of the show, and ultimately is somebody that was intended to be very involved with Discovery before he got kind of trounced out. And I also liked 7 of 9. Like, what they're trying to do with her and set her up here works a lot better than what we saw.
Going big picture here before we really get into the details, I liked the episode overall. I thought that, especially in the wake of the absurdity that was Scorpion Part 1, and Scorpion Part 2 was just along for the action part of the ride for what the setup of 1 was. This, I thought, was a solid episode all around, and I think this was one of those situations where it was a very good reflection of the feminine voice in Voyager. And you're familiar with the Bechdel test?
Yes, I am.
So that's can you have 2 female characters who are named in a movie or TV show, and can they hold a conversation without it being about a man? And you have that up and down the wall in this episode, and it doesn't even really come out to the forefront. It's not like it's beating you over the head. You just step back and you're like, wow, I watch all this great character development for Janeway and Kes and 7 of 9. This was a really good episode. And this is a really good example of, women in Star Trek and good sci-fi coming out of it. So
yeah, let's put that in context for a second. I guess this goes back to some of my old man shakes fist at cloud anger that I sometimes have with like new wave Trek fans, particularly on Twitter. Like, this aired September 10th, 1997, and easily the top 3 characters in this episode are in order: 7 of 9, Kes, and Captain Janeway. And they all have a very delicate interpersonal connection, and it is about the things that their characters are going through, and it demonstrates that, quite frankly, 22 years ago, we were already at a point in this franchise where women were everything that they could be, and I guess my sometimes annoyance at the new wave of Trek fans that have tried to sort of claim a stake in the fandom, I think, overemphasizing the woke politics of today, ignore this stuff, and that's why it annoys me. Like, what I liked about it is the same thing you liked about it. We've talked in the past about the effective use of the feminine voice in Voyager because it's this quote unquote chick show. Like, it has that rep, and I think that rep has proven to be very true in the fans of our podcast. In terms of, like, as we see people who like the show and we are noting they're predominantly women, like, oh, okay, I get it, right? And this is a great use of that, because I don't know if this would have been nearly as effective with male characters, trying to go through the same thing. I don't think it would have worked. I think this only works because you used female characters to be able to express how these the relationships worked. Although, special shout out to Tuvok. I think he's actually well used in this as well.
Yes, for a multitude of reasons that I'm looking forward to getting into. So we start off with an exterior view of Voyager, a very poorly created CGI model, and man, it's not getting any easier to watch this. Did we ever establish, did that at any point have a physical mock-up of Voyager, or has it been CGI from the jump?
It's been that's been CGI from the jump. And I want to reflect for a moment on one thing about the CGI here. Like, I actually started watching some more episodes of Enterprise, the show that comes after this, just a couple years after Voyager is over. Not even a couple years, almost immediately thereafter. Boy, oh boy, the CG on that show actually is really good. Okay, it holds up. It's not perfect by today's standards, but it actually still looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that just like that couple years there going into 2000s ended up being really critical in the development of that technology and being able to deploy it on a TV budget or what. But what a difference it makes. Like from 2001 on, it still holds up, even now. Here in 1997, so,
Joe, you can suck Enterprise's dick all you want. I still don't want to watch this goddamn thing.
that's why we're going to.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But this Voyager model is covered in what my wife called mold, and I think that's an appropriate way of it's
mold.
Deck mold, like you just inhaled and got yourself super sick. It's got Borg augmentations all over the outside of the hull. We never really established how they deployed all this Borg mold extra armor modifications in the 2 hours they had before the big fight.
A reminder, they managed to make system-wide, ship-wide modifications, including the deployment of Borg armor onto Voyager in 2 hours, with only one functional Borg drone left, by the way.
I'm guessing it's like that insulation you blow inside the wall and it just like super expands, and they just had tubes blowing that crap all over the nacelles and saucer section.
And why the fuck were they putting Borg armor on Voyager when it was obvious that for some reason Spacey's 8472's weapons just bounce off their shields anyway? It's the Borg that are super vulnerable to them, apparently. Like, adding a bunch of Borg schmutz to their hull would probably be a problem. That would be a
Voyager took 3 or 4 direct shots at against a cube, resulted in complete destruction on one hit. So very good observation there, Joe. Yet another hole punched in the armor of Scorpion Part 2. And we get a quick rundown that Voyager's not in a good place. They're still kind of in Borg territory. And most of the major ship systems are offline, including warp drive, and that they're having a hell of a time trying to get these Borg augments off so they have full control of the ship again.
Before they go into detail about what's going on with the ship, they take a long panning shot to show you that the cargo bay still looks like a Borg hostel. And they've got the bunk beds set up, those trunks that you can lock to put your stuff in so some Norwegian guy doesn't steal it from you. And in one of the alcoves is 7 of 9, who is still very Borged up for the most part. And Janeway Tuvok and the Doctor enter and start talking about her, and mentioning, well, she's starting to become more human, and we get a long, well, I'll say medical babble explanation from the Doctor, who always, like, Robert Picardo is always so good at deploying this dialogue that it never feels clunky. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. He's just really good.
Yeah, very zippy.
He's very good at it. He always is good at it. But the point is that 7 of 9's humanness is attempting to assert itself over her Borgness. And he is using his Special Federation necromancy powers to essentially slowly deborg her. Now, I want to put the 7 of 9 stuff on a platform. And I want to play a game where we compare this adventure to, I think, the closest prior Star Trek adventure that can be related to it, and that is with Hugh. You remember when, of course, the Enterprise crew capture a Borg drone, and Geordi and Data accidentally basically turned it into their dog.
Yes. Fondly.
It's a great episode. And it's really the only other time we have seen someone who was a Borg drone be able to reestablish a personal identity.
Long-term Borg drone.
Right. And, Picard's experience, I think, is very special. And I'm putting that aside at the moment. Hugh was someone that was a drone and then became someone. And so we know that this process is possible. And in that episode, it was very TNG, right? Like Hugh learned the power of friendship.
Sure.
and turned into a person. Like, it's very optimistic. It's very best angels of our nature type of storytelling. It's super worked for TNG, and that episode I think is a good one. I love Admiral Nechayev in that one, by the way, or the way that she references it later. Of like, by the way, if you ever wind up with another Borg drone you can use to bioweapon murder all of the other Borg, you're gonna fucking do it. But they, to compare that to what they do with 7 of 9 in this episode, where she is a long-term Borg drone, and unlike Hugh, she does not give a flying fuck about the power of friendship. She really enjoys being a Borg and is, I would say, almost like a haughty Borg supremacist. And her experience is very different as a consequence, and I really think it works.
She's like, and I mean, there's some references to other places, she is a former drug addict. She's a former cult member. That's the kind of persuasion that this has had over. It's a physiological need for this connection, and I think she portrays it pretty well the whole way through. We're talking about Nechayev, and we're talking about, out of the whole scope of Star Trek, there's 3 reformed, Starfleet reformed Borg incidents, and that was Hugh, that's Locutus, and now 7 of 9. Do you think at some point, somewhere in Starfleet, they're like, look, yes, we recognize that we can bring these people back, but we cannot allow that hope or expectation to foster within the Federation, because if we don't treat these guys like someone we want to eradicate and destroy, if we hold out hope that we can bring our lost friends and family back and turn them back into human, we're going to lose every battle, because we're going to start pulling punches, and instead of eradicating these people, we're gonna go soft, and we're gonna pay the price.
Obviously I jumped the gun on you by referencing Nechayev, because at the time in the Federation that this is taking place, that's absolutely has to be their policy, right? Nechayev says that, like, I don't give a shit. If you get the chance to do that again, you are going to do it. Like, that's her demand to Picard, is, I don't want to hear about you getting an opportunity to wipe out the Borg again and you taking a pass on it because one of them, turns out to reclaim their humanity. That's not the priority. So I think they're there, I think, operationally. However, I think there's more things that happen with their development of the Borg through the rest of the show that theoretically, if we saw a Star Trek show that happened after Voyager ended, they might start to have a very different take on how to handle the Borg. I don't want to talk any more about it. But right now, operationally in the Federation, not only do I think that that's true, I think we have that canon confirmed by what Nechayev did at the end of TNG. Because that was like end of season 6 that she says that. So
yeah, and yet here you have Janeway, and I don't want to blow it all up again like we did for Scorpion 2, but taking just what should have been a very disposable Borg drone, no different than the dozen or so that Chakotay jettisoned into space, and all of a sudden we have someone that we want to bring on the crew. And yes, obviously the studio execs wanted a hot blonde in a tight skin suit, and this is them ramrodding that into the show. But
yeah, and that's the forced nature of it that I talked about earlier that I can't get beyond. You're right when you pegged that last week.
Of all the excellent tag-along alien species that you could have brought onto the ship to start replenishing crewmates and everything that you're doing essentially with 7 of 9, and you're going to pick a fucking Borg drone to be that one special project. Not only that, you're bringing on the ship that very specifically and explicitly says, I do not want this. You are forcing this on me. Stop. Like in the overall Janeway hypocritical Hall of Fame, I mean, this is right up there at the top now, right off the jump.
We move forward from here to a scene in sickbay after 7 of 9 reacts poorly to the news that she is becoming more human, and as you noted, objecting to that. She has to continue to have her Borg shit removed. And the Doctor and Kes are working on that, and that's kind of when we get the intro to Kes's storyline here, is that she's asked to get some anesthetic for the surgery, and so she essentially Jedi mind tricks the hypo spray into her hands.
I was waiting for her to grab that hypo spray and just like pop a lightsaber blade out of it, because that was some real Qui-Gon shit there, man.
It was. She straight up summons that shit from across the room, and it's a clear use of her telekinesis at a level that we haven't seen probably since she was melting Tuvok's blood and boiling his brain in season 2.
We saw it in Warlord.
It's true. We did see a bit of that unlocked in Warlord, so there was a hint of it there, but they quickly confab and scan Kes and try and figure out what's going on with her. And the excuse they give us is that her contact with species 8472 has kind of like turbocharged her telepathic centers, and her abilities seem to be progressing at a much faster rate than they were before.
This whole thing just works for me. And it is, I think in any other hands, I would have had a lot of arguments about it and Mary Sue and this and that. But I mean, they've really laid the groundwork for everywhere that they go with this development. Her meditation sessions with Tuvok, we know she's got like this Omega level mutant power scale that's latent in her that she's been reluctant to go into. I think that Jennifer Lean's acting and embracing this and kind of like having a calm yet being excited about it for like this kind of like this Zen master feel works. I think that Tuvok's skepticism but like reluctant admission that at least in the beginning, she is able to push these boundaries, and then to get into like some really goofy science, like what's beyond the sub-molecular level. It all just works really well, I think.
Yeah, they built up to this in a way that makes it all make sense. Like, if you're going to write Kes off the show, this was the exact way to do it. And then, as I had alluded to, it doesn't surprise me that the guy who put that together was someone from the outside who had been watching the show, Brian Fuller, who said,
the power of watching previous episodes that so many directors just can't comprehend. Excellent stuff.
That's exactly, I mean, it's sad but true, right? And because he was a fan who was attempting to break into writing, when he got the opportunity to pitch what to do about Kes, he's like, well, this thing that makes sense would be that her telepathic abilities start to expand beyond her physiology, and as a consequence, like, she has to leave. And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And it's like, well, it's a great idea because it's the one you set up. Yeah. It's like the one where you actually have done things, like when Gary Graham and
Coldfire Caretaker
showed up, like, and part of her Super Saiyan abilities had been unlocked. She achieved Super Saiyan 1. Okay, well, she'll achieve Super Saiyan 2. And that'll be how she leaves. And saying, oh yeah, when you had contact with this super telepathic race from another dimension, it kind of like clicked something in your regulator, and now you're just kind of taken off into Narnia. It makes sense. I buy it.
Sure.
The drama basically passes between Kes and 7 of 9 from this point forward in terms of the story's focus. And it's actually summarized quite neatly by Janeway at one point when she's in the hallway with Tuvok, which is, I've got no Ocampan who wants to be more than she is, and I've got, a Borg drone that wants to be less. And that's the dichotomy that they set up. Kes is attempting to expand beyond her horizons and achieve whatever this next stage in her life is going to be, while Seven of Nine is trying to revert and go back to being a drone and making a case that she should be allowed to just choose to go back to being a drone, and essentially Janeway telling her that she doesn't have the capacity to make that choice for herself because, frankly, she's an addict and she needs to be detoxed.
It just clicked in my head, like the crux of her hypocritical argument in this, I think, falls back to Winnie the Q, when she, decided, hey, if people want to will themselves into death and suicide, who am I to stay in the way of a sentient being's like desire to die or this or that? Like, if they can clearly communicate it, then we should give it to them, and who are we to judge? Like,
I don't think it's hypocritical though. Like, I get what you're saying, that she's forcing this on. I that's where the shoehorned piece of it comes in, is like, why do they randomly have this Borg drone now?
mm-hmm.
It's like, it's super convenient that it's just so happens they wound up with this Borg drone in a way that they now feel morally responsible for her. But in terms of Janeway not allowing Seven of Nine to go back to the Borg and her reasonings for why she doesn't allow it, that makes sense. Like, I don't think that's hypocritical of her. What her rationale is, I am not going to give you that choice because I don't think you are capable of understanding that choice. Whereas Winnie the Q was perfectly capable of understanding that choice, exhaustively capable of understanding that choice, and wanted to do it anyway. And that's where Janeway's like, listen, if you want to do this, I can't stand in your way because I know you understand the choice you're making. Whereas she specifically draws a line with Seven of Nine to say, you don't really know the choice you're making there. So until you're ready to make that choice, I'm going to be making it for you.
Yeah, I suppose the mommy knows best line does get dropped pretty clearly. So I'll concede that, sure.
So the ongoing drama with Seven of Nine is that they have to rapidly deborg her as her human physiology asserts itself. Giving her a new eye, taking off pieces of her basically her armor plating. She slowly starts
gruesome stuff too, because they're talking about like some piece on her head has like over 30,000 micro attachments. So rather than remove the armor, they're going to like just remove a chunk of her skull. And she's looking gruesome through this too. Like, if you thought she looked on, the corpse Borg, which is our post First Contact Borg, and Next Gen, the Borg were just white cream makeup, which I thought looked cool. In First Contact, they start looking like zombies with diesel parts jammed into them. As they start to deborg her, the human parts come out more. There's more flesh, but it's diseased, gross-looking flesh. It's not a pretty sight, and especially when they take that optical sensor off her face, and she's just got like this eye hole with a connection socket. It bugged my wife out, and I think it was a pretty impressive feat, I think, for a new way to make the Borg look even grosser.
The kind of like half-human version of her is, I think, like, I like the way they did the makeup. Is that, like, she has, like, more color in her skin as the episode goes on.
Yeah.
I liked it. Like, they tried to show the slow, like, reassertion of her humanness in the makeup. I thought that was clever. And it was also worth pointing out that at one point she starts to Seven of Nine starts to go into like a shock and have like a stroke, and Cass is able to pinpoint the tiny little like Borg implant in her brain that's doing it, and basically like mind laser it out. She uses mind bullets. That's telekinesis, Kyle.
She does a scene out of Justice League. There's a Justice League comic where they use Superman's super sight and Batman's knowledge of the brain while the Flash is vibrating so they can reach in there and like touch someone's brain and Labat. Some craziness, some crazy comic stuff. Yet here's Kes pulling it out of her back pocket. And again, it just works. They set the table for this kind of stuff perfectly. And I love not only Tuvok's reaction, who's standing there, but the Doctor. And we've talked before the Kess and the Doctor are this package deal, and to see her start leapfrogging him in terms of medical ability, I thought was really cool, and I think that Picardo played it off great.
He did. He was good in this episode and his interactions with everyone. I thought he was kind of the comic relief too. You know, he gets real proud of the eye he made for
It was a nice eye.
7 and 9. It was a great looking eye, and Janeway's like, "That's nice. Can I need to move on. Like, I can't deal with you right now." Kess continues to explore her psychic abilities with Tuvok in a meditation scene. And that scene I thought was a real nice bookend to the last time they had a meditation scene together that was really notable.
I call the scene Tuvok really wants to get his head cooked again.
Yeah. So you're like sitting there, I'm like, no, buddy, don't do it. Don't get your blood boiled. Stevie's like, oh no, like it's gonna happen again. She's doing shit with fire because it's gonna be terrible.
It was such a good fake out, and what we're referencing is Cold Fire, and that's where Kess came into contact with the evil alternative Ocampo who were under the rule of Caretaker 2 and getting supercharged off of that. She starts kind of psycho-flexing, and we got that awesome cutaway to Tuvok's head being microwaved while his temples are like pulsating and green blood is everywhere. So you're in the same dark room. He's got his little prayer table out. It looks like, as my wife said, they're sitting there playing a Ouija board or something in the dark. And you're like, man, yeah, Tuvok is about to get fucked up again, because they're really laying out this breadcrumb trail that Kess has some major juice now, and she's not going to be able to control it. He's got this I Dream a Genie lamp out on the table with a fire. She's making the flame increase and decrease, and the whole time you're just waiting for it to get out of control and just fire starter his whole room. But she pulls through this thing tight, and she gets to a point where she says, I can see the molecules of the flame. I can see deeper. And then they treat us to some 90s crappy blur effects, which really impressed Tuvok.
Yeah, the point being is that Kess's ability is not only reached the point where she can affect things on beyond a subatomic level, which of course goes as kind of beyond science, is also she's totally in command. Like, when we saw this before, she was clearly not totally in command and was struggling with like controlling the power. This time, the way Jennifer Lean plays it off is that she is 100% locked in on controlling it. And so there's never an indication shit's going to go bad. And it doesn't, which I thought was cool. And at the same time, 7 of 9 has been drafted by Janeway to try and help resolve Voyager's ongoing engine problems of having all of the Borg schmutz, still kind of like stuck on it. And in the process of doing so, trying to convince her to like give being human a chance.
They get some real close-ups on 7 and 9's faces in these conversations, at which point you come to realize that long-term Borg have excellent dental care. There is not a single speck of black or gray or goop on her teeth anywhere. And you can say what you want about the Borg, but they know their way around a toothbrush. I would have expected all their teeth to be like meth hillbilly rotted out, but she's got a mighty fine set there. They're almost as nice as B'Elanna's, who, everything we saw about the Klingons prior said that they have like...
She got the human teeth. Yeah. She got the human teeth, which was good.
There's a little bit of ramrod. I don't know. They're not... I'd say if there's a faltering on the episode, it's that, what are they really trying to do with 7 of 9? They were very quick to exploit the Borg in the past. If Janeway and Chakotay had decided a side conversation saying, look, we might be able to mine information or use her as kind of a weapon. Janeway's laid out this roadmap of compassion and motherly instincts almost as to her reasons for wanting to go down this. I think the decision to push her out into the Jeffries tubes and get her to start interacting with the crew, despite her being in the midst of the throes of like detoxing from this drug addiction to the Borg, where, I mean, she slaps Janeway around a few times after Janeway brings out her history. They find out that her name was what? Annika Hansen, and she had been potentially one of the first cases of human assimilation by the Borg. So, what are the odds that that's who gets to be her? That she just happened to be on that cube. But 18 some years ago, her parents had flown off towards the Delta Quadrant as kind of these rejectionists that wanted to go out and see the Delta Quadrant. And I thought that was kind of a lonely story. Like, you got your wife, so, your companionship's good. But then you got your child daughter, and you're just going to fly off into the Delta Quadrant and guarantee she's never going to have any human contact for the rest of her life. Like, shitty Parents of the Year award there.
Well, 24th century has not bred responsible parenting, and I think we can establish that pretty firmly. They're trying to set things up with explaining who she is and kind of build a character for her. I think the least interesting thing about Seven of Nine is her quote-unquote human life. And when they try and drag that out, I think the far more interesting thing about her is just her being the flip side of Hugh. And instead of being kind of a simpleton that is turned by the power of friendship, she's somebody that has been so used to being Borg that she actually tries to go back to it. And later on, even as that, plot line fades away and she becomes more comfortable being human, she still very much does things the way Borg do things and doesn't ever kind of let that go. And to that end, she ends up in the Jeffries tubes working on all the Borg schmutz with Harry Kim, who his role in this episode is to try and have small talk with Seven of Nine. It's fine. It's kind of funny. But she spots an opportunity to use a communications device to contact the collective and attempts to do so. And she's actually only thwarted by two things. One, that somehow, some way, Starfleet security personnel are so incompetent that merely being hit in the shoulder by a tossed Harry Kim apparently renders you completely incapable.
Knock the fuck out, dude. That was like my big focus for this episode. I get it. She's still got Borg implants. She's probably pretty strong. Harry's not good at taking punches. She catches him off guards. I get it. She knocked Harry out. But this fucking security guard, you've got a Borg drone who is being like FIDO'd, right? And set out into your ship to start fixing things. You should have like a certain degree as a Starfleet security officer of not trusting the situation at all. And this dude like posts up while he's supposed to be guarding her from doing exactly this. And he puts his back to her and like acts like he's guarding the room from some unknown foe out in the hallway somewhere else. So yeah, she blasts Harry across the jaw, and Harry goes flying. And like you said, like kind of clips this guy's shoulder, and down he goes. As if my opinion of Chakotay of Tuvok could not get any worse. Man, just whether it's him or these terrible ass securities, I want to see the fight between the Ferengi and the security guys from False Prophets. Because if this is what it takes to put these guys down, man, like they could have just sneezed down one of these dudes and knocked him over.
Yeah, like what hope do you have against the real threats in the Delta Quadrant when you get jabronied by a couple non-combatant Ferengi and Harry Kim's shoulder? I mean, like truly the most deadly weapon on the vessel. Forget space pipes, but getting shoulder checked by Harry Kim. Harry getting phlegmy with you is what takes you down.
Do they ever show Smoldering Catcher like failing a security opportunity? Because he gets a little bit of playtime later in the episode.
I was going to point that out. He actually Smoldering Catcher guy is no jabroni in this episode. Like he gets his gat out when he's got to keep an eye on Seven of Nine, gun forward, eyes locked on. Like he does not gonna allow himself to get done like this rando in the hallway.
Let's dog ear this, because I want to start watching from now on and see at any point does he ever shit the bed, because I think he's got a pretty good record so
He
far.
does. He is. Ensign Elia has a track record of competence.
Yeah, maybe that's
With,
part of his contract is like, yeah, I don't need a lot of speaking lines, but don't make me a punk. I ain't gonna
this
be
is
no
the
bitch.
this is the most he ever talks, by the way. That the lines that he has on the comm, those are the most lines he has in a single episode ever.
Well, he spent them well.
He did. He did. He got some serious solo background action where he was the most effective security officer we've seen on the ship in probably weeks. So good job, buddy.
Harry gets tossed like a DJ Jazzy Jeff by Uncle Phil into this crap security guard, and 7 to 9 gets to hacking the subspace communication. She's going to put out a distress beacon to pull all of the Borg cubes directly up Voyager's ass so she can get back into the collective. Meanwhile, up in Tuvok's quarters, Kessa's spider senses start going off, and she's like, oh shit, I detected disturbance in the Force. I see the Borg drone playing games down there. I'm going to send like a subspace ripple along the wall that's about to warp her. And by warp, I mean have an electrical explosion come out of the console and shock her ass down to the ground. And she does it. And now people start getting freaked out because her shit's starting to actually damage the ship. And yeah, she's doing some great stuff, but maybe this is getting past the point of comfort for some of these guys.
Yeah, the conversation that Tuvok has with Janeway about it is, the bad news is that while that worked, what she did and how she uses her powers is destabilizing the molecular structure of the ship. So there's a real negative consequence to the fact that her powers obviously warp matter because she's toying with things at beyond a subatomic level. And that's going to be a problem because they're on a fucking spaceship where if you mess with that, then suddenly stuff gets explosively decompressed, as we will see later. And you can't have that.
We've talked about what's the right way to use Tuvok. There's only so many times you can put him in the real talk, like, my emotions are out and I'm having an outburst. He's very quickly establishing, and I don't know if it's Tim Russ or the writer's room or what, but the right way to use Tuvok is to put him kind of as like the tip of the spear in dealing with an oh shit situation where he can throw a little bit of a sass into the context of the conversation, and it makes him engaging. It keeps him as a position of authority. I don't want to say it humanizes him, but it makes him a little bit more interesting, and almost watching the way he reacts to this wild shit going on around him can at times be more interesting than what they're actually showing on the screen.
All props to Tim Russ being such a nerd about playing a Vulcan that when he's given the opportunity to be interesting in that subtle way, that he does it. So I don't think that's direction. I really think that's more him, Mm-hmm. Like he's really dialed into how to play this character. And when he gets the opportunity to play in the margins like this,
yeah,
you kind of get the sensation that you're talking about. And I agree, it's really good in this episode, and I think that's Tim Russ's talent in portraying Tuvok. The fate of 7 of 9 is that she is now in the brig, being guarded by the single most effective security officer on the ship, Smoldering Catcher guy, and Janeway has a series of interactions with her over 2 scenes where essentially she is trying to convince her to give being human a chance and break through her preconceptions about being an individual. And the real difference between how he was handled and how this is handled starts to really break through here as they touch upon that intoxicating power of certainty and self-assurance comes as a consequence of being part of the multi-billion, person collective. That being separated from that after being part of that for so long has an effect on you that is damaging to your psyche. That the cooperative drones in the Unity episode, right? Like they also suffered the pitfalls of not having that, right? Like the whole point of that episode was that these guys who were Borg a lot less and were all from the Alpha Quadrant and all had reason to cooperate with each other couldn't find a way to do it without basically kickstarting their collective again, right?
It's that drug addict angle again, and I think it works so well. And I think ever since we kind of started fleshing out into that, it really puts the Borg in a whole different light for me, and it's a good light. It's an interesting light that, you know, there is this pleasure and this euphoria and this bigger sense of purpose, and yeah, moving away from it is like going through withdrawal.
It also puts into context that the Borg aren't zombies. Like all of the Borg are invested into this, and separating any of them from it in this fashion is going to have this effect where their personalities will reassert themselves quickly in the absence of it. It's just that they are so used to not having one that it becomes alien and strange to them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen, you know, basically the blank slate version of this with Hugh. And we've seen the temporary, it was horrifying because obviously my experiences as a individual are far more prevalent to me experience that Picard had of being temporarily assimilated. And this is, you know, a third way of someone who is a lifer who finally gets out of jail and doesn't know how to deal with the real world.
Institutionalized.
You know? Institutionalized into being Borg. And Jerry Ryan's strength in portraying that line is, you know, I'm a big fan of how she plays this character, and I feel like, you know, she's now getting an opportunity to explore that space. And I like that they set her up from the beginning of like her assertion of her individuality will not always be something that is gonna work on the ship, right? Like she's gonna want to do things the way she wants to do them, and that's always not always going to be a positive thing when she asserts her personality, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that develops. I'm wondering how much of this is us reading between the lines and how much of it was intended stuff in the writer's room. I think a fair amount of it. I mean, there's some pretty nail on the head stuff that she discusses while she's having these temper tantrums with Janeway in the brig. So again, we can say maybe Brian Fuller, maybe other elements, but for as much damage as I think they just did with species 8472, whatever, and blowing up 15 cubes, this is kind of redeeming it a little bit. We'll see how long that lasts.
So the Cass storyline starts to reach its apex as she has a long overdue scene with Neelix.
Neelix, man, when's the last time we really saw him? Like, seeing him on the screen was almost a shock. Like, he was barely any Scorpion stuff at all, was he?
Yeah, he was not used very much going back several episodes now. I'm going to take a look to see the last time we had a
Tuvok, I think.
Rise, yeah, because after that was Favorite Son. After that was Before and After.
He was a chump in worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would say the last time he was prominent was Rise, and that was officially 8 episodes prior. So
yeah, man.
It's been a second.
And then the last time we saw these two characters specifically, which came in as a package deal, was Warlord. So it has been a long fucking time. I would say exactly what you said, well overdue. At this point, they're well past the need to establish, you know, are we dating, are we not dating? I think they're pretty firmly confirming that this has been a separation. They don't get into if there'd been more since Warlord, but they touch on some nice points on the scale where it's like, hey, you know, the last time we had this super rare wine was when we first came on. You know, our focus was on exploration. He says, you know, I see now that I was holding you back before. She says, I could have never gotten to where I was without you. I thought that was a pretty touching exchange.
It was one that they needed to do like 4 episodes ago. But at least they're doing it now, and it was solid.
He starts asking more and more kind of questions about what she's experiencing, how it feels, and as she starts describing these changes that she's going through, and he's kind of narrating again her story arc, right? Which is what happens when a Kampa don't stop, what happens when they live away from the caretaker, what happens when they press their boundaries. She had always believed that she had this destiny out in the stars and that Ocampa could achieve more. As she starts fleshing this out, she starts kind of phasing in and out of existence, like taking on this ghostly form. And the ship does not do well as she embarks on this. The hull starts flexing with admittedly better graphics than Twisted, which is the last time we really saw this. We're getting these weird ripples. Bridge gets alerted to it, and they're like, what the fuck? And Janeway goes down with Tuvok. I don't know if Tuvok goes down, but the writing's on the wall. They know what's going to happen here.
The way to, I guess, to describe Kess's evolution is that she's becoming like almost incorporeal. Like her person is becoming incorporeal as well. It's it's a bargain effect. It doesn't look great, but it does the job, which is that it is making the urgency of her need to get off the ship real and immediate.
Where did the scene with her having a conversation with Janeway fit in? It was prior to this, right?
No, it was after. That's the last scene she has. Like, the last scene she has is Janeway comes in. They start talking about how, like, oh yeah, I'm going incorporeal. I probably just need to get off the ship. And then literally she goes into terminal velocity on that, and then that's the end of the episode. And then they close with what happens with 7 of 9. But to kind of wrap up the discussion of Kess, what happens is that Janeway comes in. They have their final scene together where they talk a little bit about, what's happening to her, that she's part of the family, that they're going to do to help her. And she tries to put her at Janeway at ease to be like, no, whatever's happening to me is happening. And I just need to get off the ship because obviously at this point I'm a threat to all of you. This is having a violent reaction on the ship. And they eventually just have to get her to a shuttle because she starts to completely destabilize.
Thought it was a great scene for a couple different reasons. I thought it was great acting out of both Kess and Janeway, Kate Mulgrew and Jennifer Lean. I think that, my first complaint was going to be like, how many times has there been some sort of like goofy shit where someone's like, I just need to go and be free. And then, it's very clear that there's an alien influencer or something wrong. And Janeway calls it out. And she's like, what if what you're going through is just a figment of your imagination, that this is something bad? You're just caught up in the moment, and you leaving your home is going to turn out to be disastrous for you. And Janeway calling that out specifically felt really good, that the show kind of acknowledges its own plot devices from the past. And what if this is one of those? And I think that Kess does a good job of explaining that away and just saying, look, I have my control my faculties. There's no alien influencer. And, at the end, it's my decision. Would you tell me no and deny me that? And Janeway says no, but, would I plead with you and argue with you and beg with you? Yes, for as long as it takes. And I really like that exchange.
Yeah, I read that was difficult for Kate Mulgrew to do because she really liked working with Jennifer Lean. Didn't like that she was being put off the show. And I think that came across well. Stevie was watching this one with me, and she actually kind of got near tears as it ended. Like, it's a very effective emotionally, and they serve Kess's end well. We get one final experience with her and Tuvok together, where Tuvok basically mind melds enough control into Kess that she manages to get onto the shuttlecraft and away from the ship without creating a problem for everybody. And which I thought was good. Like him kind of like charging in with like, all right, I'm gonna mind meld. I'm gonna give you everything I got, girl. All right, good luck, Godspeed. And ultimately, she gets onto the shuttle. She gets away. She starts to completely go Super Saiyan, and that is when she decides to go ahead and give Voyager a bit of a shove. And poor Tom's only dialogue in the episode is basically remarking that all of a sudden they are at ludicrous speed. And
he says everything except for transwarp and or warp 10.
They go so fast, it's an impossible speed. And the end result is that basically with her Super Saiyan blast, her final Kamehameha, she wishes Voyager away nearly 10,000 light years closer to home and completely clear of what they understood to be Borg space, which is a big fucking deal. It's essentially 10 years closer to home, and that's a pretty big gift from Kess. Like, hey, I'm going to push you as far as I can push you, and good luck.
And I am okay with every last drop. This is the promise of Voyager for once paying off, that all of the goofy trials and tribulations and Kess plots and this and that and time investment paying off for the crew. And sure, in this case, it's a magic wish to knock them, whatever, but it's, previous actions doing something to lend itself towards the overall mission, which is to return home. They laid, like I said, the groundwork for her to have this kind of an ascension into, godhood already on the table, and flinging it certainly, within Q's capability and all these other powerful beings, caretaker and whatever else, to move people around. So sure, great way to end the episode. My biggest complaint about this episode, though, hands down, is that for as intertwined as Kess and the Doctor were, there was no sort of final scene between them, and I think it is a damn shame. I know we got one more romp with Kess to go, and I hope there's something to be said between the two of them in her future interactions.
Well, they did have a bit of a last scene. It wasn't a farewell, but remember, she's being diagnosed for all of her issues, and the Doctor comes over and says, hey, why don't you go relax? And she's like, no, I've missed you. I want to spend time with you, trying to figure out what's going on. And then, they share that moment together. Like, that is their farewell, like that.
It's still, I mean,
it's not the big one she gets with Janeway, but you really can only do one of those,
I would have rather, I just sat there and talked about all the Bechdel scale and everything else. He would still just be a toaster if it wasn't for her. He owes her his life numerous times over. I could have gone for something a little bit more. I think you're right. It would have came at the sacrifice of the scene with Janeway, but it left me wanting. And like I said, I know we got one more Kess episode in the pipe down the road, and I hope they cross paths and there's something there for us.
We wrap with 7 of 9. So ultimately, Janeway confronted 7 of 9 with her human identity and with increasing insistence that she needs to give being human a chance. And 7 of 9's acceptance of that begins haughtily, and then finally she collapses emotionally in the insecurity and that she's feeling about being alone. There's a really effective moment when she's going to go into 7 of 9's brig cell, and Janeway's and 7 of 9 says, "I'll kill you," in a way that is very wounded animal. And Janeway's like, "I really don't think you're going to." Meanwhile, Smoldering Ketchup guy's in the back with his gat out,
I'll zap you, dumbass.
I'll fucking shoot. That's fine. I'll shoot me a Borg today. Seems legit.
I'm not like
So
these punk Starfleet security officers. Maki don't fuck around.
I got a phaser in one hand, and that don't work. I got a space pipe in the other. I knew Lon Suter. He taught me things.
I got a catcher glove, and you're not gonna like where it's gonna go.
But ultimately, her appeals to her humanity are successful, and we last see Seven of Nine, shall we say, posed in the cargo bay for the camera, in the iconic cat suit, with Jerry Ryan now at full Jerry Ryan levels.
They're like, oh, look, the other blonde's gone. I got in her things and discover this whole treasure trove of new jumpsuits, skin-tight jumpsuits. I wasn't feeling the velvet ones, but this tinfoil one I think will accentuate my curves well.
Yeah, and like, she goes from messed up Borg drone looking to, Jerry Ryan.
Supermodel.
Yeah, supermodel Jerry Ryan.
And dude, even, yeah, and especially, oh my god, I went blanking on his name. Producer for DS9.
Ron Moore. Ron Moore
is like
hates this shit, yeah.
And I can't blame him. Why can't she look like a fucking mess? Why does she a supermodel with some doodad super glued to her face? Like, and of course it's the politics, and they say as much that, when they showed what was supposed to be the new sexy time to the Paramount Studios that she was going to be Borged up for 3 episodes. They were not happy about it at all, and they're like, no, we need to show this transformation. But here's the end product. This is what we're saying goodbye to Jennifer Lean for. And despite whatever Jerry Ryan's going to be able to do to exceed expectations, this point blank is what Voyager has resorted to, and it is super hot blonde in super tight cat suit in green neon light surrounded by smoke like it's a strip club. I am returned to my feelings that this is Voyager turning on itself and undoing a lot of hard work that they've done. And I mean, the guy parts of me enjoy it, but the Star Trek parts of me are like, man, really? Come on.
We've had the opportunity to reminisce a bit about the scumminess nature of them doing this, that it's just not very Star Trek of them to ditch a developed character so that they can trot out sex appeal. We talked about that in our last live stream, not the season 3 rip, which we have not yet recorded but will have happened by the time people listen to this, but the mess hall we did before that. And I said then, I'll say now, that Jerry Ryan ends up, perhaps on accident, being a fantastic addition to the show as an actor, and that her character ends up being one of the better ones that we get to have because of that. But the sacrificing Kess, like, I don't know how much of a net addition it ends up being. I think the show does get better from this point forward. I think that has more to do with better writing talent in place from this point forward. Brian Fuller being the big reason as to why. And not so much necessarily the Kess 709 switch. I think that ends up being kind of a wash by the end. I think that I think I can at least say that. Like, we trade good for good. If the show feels like it's better in its second half, it's not because of that. It's because of better writing overall.
Well, we'll see. And I'll judge it. It comes down. Season 3 left a very good taste in my mouth, and I think we can't help but count this this moment of her there, as you said, posed in the stripper outfit as a milestone for the show.
Her ass just jutted out, just in maximum sexy pose too. It was pretty.
How long was she waiting in that cargo bay for them to just happen upon her?
Oh yeah. So unfortunately, Peter got sucked into a time-space butthole and has departed from us. But in his absence, I will for the first time read off the the episode to be seen next, and that is Season 4, Episode 3, Day of Honor. The Klingon holiday, known as the Day of Honor, comes and B'Elanna decides to embrace her Klingon heritage and participate in a series of ritual tests. So, because that's going to be the first big B'Elanna episode we've had in quite some time. And, we'll see where that takes us. It's a picture of two people in spacesuits. I'm going to take a random stab that the other person is Tom Paris, so... we might be in for hot and cold and maybe chemistry. So until next time, thank you for listening to VG Please, A Hateful Voyage Through the Delta Quadrant. And Peter would like you to know he was actually sucked off into a picture of Jerry Ryan in that cat suit. It's just that strut. Her ass just had that gravitational pull. And he promises he'll be back for next week. We'll see you then. Peace.